Do you know anyone who has made a lifelong practice and has really refined this skill through, endless trial and error, really got it up to a fine art? The art of blaming others for every difficulty that they encounter. Do you have those experts in your life? So what is going on there? What is going on when somebody has something that happens to them that they don't like, or something goes sideways in their lives, a decision gets made that is not in their favor, and the first reaction, their default setting really, is to blame others and to not accept any real responsibility. Okay, so how does that connect to 1090, to the idea of the proposition really that life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond? All right, is that too extreme for you? This is not to downplay or minimize by any stretch the difficulties that some of us face. And there are many difficulties. Life presents us with endless challenges. But the proposition of life is 10% what happens to you and 90% response, is how we respond, is something that I would propose for everyone to consider, because we're all seemingly hardwired to blame others first. Okay, so if life is just a small amount what happens to us, and really what matters at the end of the day is how we respond, and if that number is the overwhelming majority of the experience in our lives, then what we're really talking about is something that's very, very liberating in terms of our options. Wouldn't you also say that we, when we stop and think about it, really have more options than we think? We have more choices than we think. So let's just work through a couple of scenarios, because, frankly, many books have been written about bad decisions that people have made, most notably, and that this book is just chock full of, the worst mistakes in history, history's worst decisions, all kinds of famous people in here. And notably, the decisions that they've made were based on incomplete information, but also pride, and also the inclination to blame others when things did in fact go wrong. So now you got books about it. Okay, so can you think of some examples? What are some examples of life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond? Let's take the example of the many different pathways that our high school experience can take, or maybe had taken in the past. Okay, so let's take a grade 9 student who comes in, to a school from a different board, really feels isolated and disconnected. They've got choices, right? Once they go through their first couple of weeks of school, maybe they make some connections with people, maybe they join a club, maybe they have the courage to overcome their fears, and then their trajectory in high school and beyond goes in one way, okay, in one particular direction. And, hopefully a positive direction where the person, grows and interacts with others and shares who they are with others and develops as a result. The other direction, of course, could be one of increasing isolation and disconnectedness and, a feeling of increased separateness from others, where things go in a completely different direction with a whole host of consequences. So did that student, if we were that student in grade 9, did we have those choices? Chances are, if you think back to when you were in grade 9, you probably didn't think very consciously about choices whatsoever. You probably thought that you couldn't do this or that. And, life is full of obstacle thinking. And it's not just limited to grade 9 or grade 4 or grade 11, when we struggle in a particular class, right? 10% what happens to you, 90% how you respond, means that, in fact, when you stop and think, and if you can just set the anxiety aside long enough and talk to someone who you trust, all right, start thinking about those different options. You, in fact, have more choices than you think, you've got more options than you think, and you have a wide array of choices in terms of how you respond to something that happens. But chances are your impatience will blind you to that fact, which is why it's always a good thing when you're frustrated or when life seems to sideline you or options you feel get removed. You got to count to 10 and you got to try and be patient, and you've got to open your eyes nice and wide, and you've got to look around you and not just straight ahead, and discover that you have more choices than you think.